Hey, welcome to the channel if you're new, and welcome back if you've been here before. Today's task was pulling out the old rear end, cleaning up the grime and surface rust, and prepping for paint tomorrow and building the new rear end. So here's a tip. Starting with the shocks out of the car, jack up one side of the rear end to pivot the other side down to make that spring easier to remove. Then the other side comes out real easy after that. Now I'm removing the parking brake line. Here's another tip. Take a 13 millimeter, not a 13 mil. There is a difference, fellas. 13 millimeter box end wrench and put it over the plastic fitting inside the brake plate and then just pull the line out. Works very well. I'd already taken the driver's side brakes apart the night before. And I used to have a drum brake tool, but I couldn't find it. I'm putting disc brakes on the new rear end, so I don't care if I destroy these. They are bound for the scrapyard. A screwdriver, needle nose, and maybe some vice grips will get the job done. Now I put some jack stands in for a little support while I unbolt the trailing arms. This side was a little bit of a struggle. The hole in the frame to access the lower trailing arm doesn't seem to be centered. I put an extension on with a swivel and an 18 millimeter socket and taped the socket to the swivel. I tried it before with just an extension and a socket, which resulted in a socket in the frame, which I retrieved with a magnet. So there's another tip. Electrical tape your socket to your extension or swivel if there's a chance of losing it into the abyss. I recommend using some penetrating fluid a couple of days prior to removing old crusty bolts. I had hit these a couple of times over the last 2 days. A good impact doesn't hurt either. The Harbor Freight Earthquake is a nice torquey gun for the price. I fought the lower arm bolt on the passenger side and ended up using an air hammer with a drift end to punch it through. With the lowers off, I worked on the upper trailing arms and got those out and then dropped it to the ground. I don't think that rear end is bad. It spins freely with no bind or grind, but it did have a leak in the rear cover. I'm not sure if this is for scrap or if I might clean it up and try to sell it for a few bucks. If you need an 80s GM 10 bolt, let me know. I think it took about an hour and a half to get all that done. Out with the old and in with the new. Busy day today. Got this all cleaned up, painted. 3 coats, Duple Color 1634. Got the rear end pretty much put together. The axles will go in tomorrow, and tomorrow night or Sunday it's going in. Peace.
The next day.
I don't know why this camera has a jump in it sometimes. You may not even be able to see it on being sped up, but it comes and goes. It's got a little jump to it. I put the studs in by hand and used one of the nuts from the T-bolts for the axle holder, and it's the same size. These intersections are heavy. I recommend another set of hands if you can, but one person can do it. I used the lube locker gasket with this, and about every video I've watched, you have to give this intersection some love taps with a hammer to get it to seat. So here's a tip there. Even a cheap thread chaser kit is very handy. After banging on that housing for a while to seat it, some of the threads were a little worse for wear. That thread chaser helped out there quite a bit. I torqued this down to 35 foot-pounds, and I had also painted that center section with the Duple Color 1634 as it comes in bare metal. Took just under 10 minutes to get that beast seated in. Now I move on to installing the UMI shock tower brace and the ridetech upper and lower strong arms. It was only after installing the strong arms I realized I'd forgotten the UMI control arm brace kit and had to take the strong arms back out. The control arm brace kit was a little bit of a pain in the ass, and it required adding some spacers to both sides of the lowers against the control arm outside pockets and cutting off some of the top threaded portion of the bar, the internal threads on that piece, on the passenger side to get the proper alignment for the bolt to go through. I didn't get any video of that process, but there was a lot of cussing. I then reinstalled everything and called it quits for the night. I started all this on Thursday morning, and now it's Sunday. Now it's time to install the second axle. I did the first axle off camera. I used pieces from my ball joint kit to drive the axle seals in place and added a thin layer of RTV to the outside of those before I drove them home. I also added a little RTV to the outer bearing races. So I got a little excited when I got the rear end done, and I didn't film any of the installation of that bad boy. It was actually pretty easy. I still got to buy some. I need to get some new shock bolts for the top tower. The ones that came with the UMI are too big for those ridetechs, and I don't want to drill those out. Look at that sweet thing. All painted. Looking pretty good. Done for the day. Heading out to a local car show. Peace. That is it for my mini vacation. I got a lot done on the car and the yard. Next up is getting the car back on the ground and throwing a level and laser on it to make sure nothing is stupid out of alignment with the engine and transmission in the rear. Then I'll pull the engine and transmission out and start rebuilding on those. The transmission will go to a shop. The engine I'm going to do myself, hopefully. And it might be time to order a new fuel tank and lines and install the brake lines. I do have a disc brake kit to install on that rear end as well.